I will have trouble sleeping at night if Donald Trump is elected. I will also have trouble sleeping at night if Hillary Clinton is elected. As despicable as Donald Trump's words are, I find Hillary Clinton's actions and track record is very troubling. So Donald Trump, bashes immigrants and is a xenophobic and racist loudmouth. But Hillary Clinton, has been promoting these wars that have killed 1 million black and brown people in Iraq, for example. I am very concerned about trouble breaking out in Syria in this air war that Hillary is threatening to have. So, as disturbing as Donald Trump's talk is, I find Hillary Clinton's track record is actually very much of concern too. This politics of fear that tells you you've got to vote against the person you most dislike or the person you are most afraid of, that politics of fear has a track record, because a lot of people have been, that's been like the prevailing mythology. You got to vote your fears, not your values. And what has that delivered? All the reasons you're told to vote for the lesser evil, because you didn't want the expanding wars, you didn't want the meltdown of the climate, or the Wall Street bailouts, or the deportation of immigrants. That's exactly what we've gotten by allowing ourselves to be silenced. So in my view, we need to reject the lesser evil and fight for the greater good, like our lives depend on it, because in fact they do. Here's how we can win. There are 43 million young people and not so young people who are trapped in predatory student loan debt. That is a winning plurality of the vote. Ours is the only campaign that will cancel that debt and bail out young people like the establishment bailed out Wall Street. When that word gets out to 43 million people that they can actually come out and take over this election and cancel that debt, we could see something happen, not splitting the vote, but potentially flipping the vote. Part of the problem, with Hillary's abuse of the rules, she was sort of too big to jail on the rules, and she violated those rules with a sense of impunity, and she violated them for a purpose which she stated herself, that she wanted her private information private. Now it turns out half of her emails she deleted as private. If someone is working for you and half of their emails on the job are for their private personal foundation, it really raises questions. You've learned really in real time why it is that you can't have a revolutionary campaign in a counter-revolutionary party. Bernie did everything right, and his supporters did everything right, but the playing field was really steeply and unfairly tilted against you, from superdelegates to Super Tuesdays to voting irregularities to the emails that showed how the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, was colluding behind closed doors with Hillary Clinton's campaign to smear Bernie Sanders in the press. And this was extremely unfair. And then Hillary now, has really moved to court Republicans. So what we say is that we need a new kind of offensive in the Middle East, because bombing terrorism and shooting terrorism is not quelling terrorism. It's only fanning the flames of terrorism, the misery and the poverty. We now have somewhere between 700 or 800 or even more military bases around the world. Do you know how many military bases all other countries combined have? About 30. There's something really wrong with this picture. How much of our budget actually goes to maintaining this bloated and dangerous military budget? 54% of our discretionary budget, which is about half of your income tax, is going to this failed, catastrophic policy of regime change. The idea that I oppose vaccines is completely ridiculous, or that I'm anti-science. I am certainly not hostile to science. I'm not anti-science. I believe that asking questions is part of our responsibility as scientists and as physicians. Many of Hillary's positions, whether it was helping to destroy the social safety net, aid to families with dependent children, welfare as we knew it, was basically destroyed by the Clintons, who wanted to replace it with something else that put millions more kids into poverty. Whether it was the Wall Street deregulation, again cheered on by both Bill and Hillary, that led to the meltdown and the loss of 9 million jobs and the theft of 5 million homes, largely from communities of color and lower income families. And then the war effort that Hillary has especially been, you know, the engine behind, whether Iraq or Libya. She wants to go into Syria and create a so-called no-fly zone, which risks going to war with Russia that's already in that airspace, which would be a very scary thing to do. So to my mind, that's just not compatible with what my view of feminism is, that has a responsibility not just to your own family, but to all families and to the human family. We found a way to bail out Wall Street. And when we needed the money, we found it, including about $17 trillion worth of practically zero interest loans, which was made available, as needed. We found a way to bail out Wall Street, the guys that crashed the economy with their waste, fraud, and abuse. So my point is, as responsible adults, we need to bail out a younger generation that is held hostage in this unpayable student debt. The Federal Reserve doesn't need the permission of Congress. This is an act that the Federal Reserve can take on its own. Yes, we would sort of owe that money to ourselves. We would owe that money to ourselves, but as a nation, we have the capacity to do that. We can decide to spend money on ourselves, and in particular, we can decide to spend money on our younger generation who currently does not have a future. Who is more worth spending money on than our younger generation? There are people in Israel who are really working for human rights, who are actually building community with the Palestinians. There are human rights groups that are building trust, that are building community, and that are building confidence. These are the groups that we need to be lifting up to create a Middle East that's going to work for everyone. We need to ensure that every community has a civilian review board so that communities are in charge of their police instead of having police in charge of their communities. Any death at the hands of police needs to be investigated.
So we have a situation where a war is being waged against black people in this country. And basically what we have to do is call attention to that. So the other issues are important. They aren't connected, because what we're talking about a system of oppression, with the police being the front line of that oppression. So we have to talk about that. We can't evade it. We can't erase it. We have to deal with it. quantitative easing was the creation of money. They created money and handed that money to the banks at the tune of $85 billion a month. Let me say that one more time. $85 billion a month. So if there's mechanisms that can be found to basically prop up the banks, why can't the American people get propped up once in a while?
When you think about a personal hero to you, who comes to mind?
Martin Luther King.
Kills you that I asked her that first, Mr. Baraka, because now you can't go there. So who's your choice?
I have someone from that same period, Fannie Lou Hamer.
Oh, tell people about why.
Fannie Lou Hamer was a black woman from a plantation in Mississippi who didn't have formal education. But what she did have was a spirit of resistance. And she became a leader of the movement in Mississippi and really across the country. And she was famous for going to the Democratic Convention in 1964 and demanding with other members of SNCC and the Mississippi Freedom and Democratic Party to sit in place of the Mississippi Democratic Party because they said that the party from Mississippi was illegal and that the real representatives were the black masses and other progressive whites in Mississippi. And they were denied, of course, and Johnson tried to eliminate her influence, but she was a hero to millions of people around the world. She's my hero.